Well, good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're watching this or when you're watching it. Thought I'd make an update video covering kind of the last couple of years in my life, the life of my family, as we've had a lot of changes. The Lord has moved us to different ministries, and we are grateful for that. We've been blessed to be part of it, but it has meant some changes. One that you can see if you've watched any of the other videos is that as you look behind me at the background there, it is not my former classroom. I just finished out my 6th year teaching at what was Community Christian when I started, and then a couple years into it, they changed the name to Family Christian. So I finished out year 6 at Family Christian, and I have left teaching, something I've done for 17, 18 years, kind of off and on. I had some other times where I left and did some things and then would come back to it. But I have left the classroom, and what you see is my office here at Mount Ephraim Baptist in Arcadia, Florida, where for the past 10 months or so I've been a part-time associate pastor. And now, since school let out in May, I have come on as a full-time associate pastor. And man, I'm grateful for that opportunity because not only were they willing to take me on part-time and give me a chance to minister and to work, and I've had great opportunities to preach. They've been gracious to listen to me preach on Sunday mornings on more than one occasion. And as I always say, it's always a blessing to be able to preach once. Even more of a blessing to be able to preach a second time and have people actually show up. So that's been amazing. It's been an encouragement. And then also have an adult Sunday school class. And so the opportunity to minister and work in that environment and come on now as full time, that they still wanted me here, at least, as it stands right now, has been a blessing. It has been a change. I had not, for years, not necessarily seen myself in church ministry. I had done it way back in my 20s and kind of come to the conclusion that that probably wasn't for me. That given my temperament and personality, and also, the call of the Lord matters, right? That's the key thing with ministry. It's, as my pastor here, Pastor Spurgeon, is fond of saying, this isn't a job, this is a call. And so I struggled for years with whether or not I had that call. And there's times I would indulge the thought or pray about it, but nothing ever really seemed to pan out. And kind of the desire, at least for church ministry, would go away. And I always had kind of school ministry as well. And then a couple years ago, the school had me teach junior Bible, and I hadn't taught high school Bible in I think at that point in like 4 years. I'd kind of been away from it, just teaching high school history, which I loved history. It's history is one of those subjects that kind of comes naturally to me, because people say, well, it's just memorization. No, there's more to it than just memorization in terms of understanding the flow of history, the consequences of ideas, philosophies, all those sorts of things. But I enjoyed it. But the Lord had other ideas. So the school had me teach junior Bible. And during that year, doing the Q&A with students and class discussions and moving through the curriculum, as we got progressively through the year, I felt more and more a burden, a desire to go into church ministry. And it was a desire I sort of pushed back against, I fought against. I didn't necessarily like the idea of it. I wasn't sure that I'm fit for most modern churches, as I'm kind of in a weird place. I'm not an evangelical, I guess, in the sense of some of these guys. I'm not super crazy about a lot of the Jesus is my boyfriend music. I'm not a huge fan of let's turn out the lights and sort of sway back and forth and really get in touch with our feelings and emotions and a lot of the things that kind of I've been around in modern evangelical churches over the last 15 years or so. Not really my thing. Also, not super comfortable in a lot of the more fundamentalist churches that I initially at least trained. That was my college and kind of worked in. Not really where those guys are at either. And so I wasn't sure that there's a place for you in ministry. But so that for that reason, several others kind of pushed back on it, didn't necessarily want to do it, didn't necessarily want to leave the classroom and the interaction with students. That is one of the things that I've loved as a teacher, is the opportunity to go in each day, and whether it was teaching Bible at some of the other schools we've been in or teaching history, was the opportunity to interact with students, to answer questions, to teach, to try to, in some way, shape, or form, mold the thinking of the next generation. And I know, some folks out there would say, well, that's just, it's all just brainwashing. Yes, because everything is trying to brainwash you in some way, shape, or form. The social media stuff that you intake, whatever you're reading, because hopefully you do read, whatever you're reading, wherever you go to church, whatever you're watching, whatever the algorithm is telling you on YouTube or, heaven forbid, TikTok, Instagram, whatever the case, it's all trying to influence you, to brainwash you to some end. So yes, I'm teaching. It was an opportunity to try to influence foundational thought of my students, knowing the world that they were going out into, knowing that ideas do matter. Loved all of that. Didn't like, and if you've been in my classes or you had to, you were one of my bosses, you'll know this, I did not like lesson plans. That is an unnecessary evil. That is, I would tell you, lesson plans are a result of the fall. I didn't like doing them, and didn't necessarily see where they mattered, as long as I knew what was going on. I know some people are like, oh, state standards. Well, kick rocks. Also, not always great at getting grades in on time. And for me, it was kind of like, I don't know. I feel like people like surprises, and so you get that progress report, you get that report card, and it's like, surprise, you're not doing as well as you thought you were, or maybe you're doing better than you thought you were. But so I didn't necessarily like all the paperwork side of the house in terms of teaching. Enjoyed the interaction, and all the way back then, wasn't sure I wanted to leave that. And so during that year, teaching Bible, prayed a lot about it, thought through it a lot, and finally about mid-spring, it would have been mid-spring 2025, I was preaching in a chapel service for a local small Bible college. And when I say small, it's a great ministry. They're doing great things, and they train people, and it's very much a local school, but it is very small. And I'm doing chapel, and there's maybe 20 people in, and so I mentioned at the start of the service that, hey, pray for me. I'm looking potentially at going back into church ministry. If you know of any churches that might be looking for a part-time assistant or associate pastor, I'd be interested. Just pray for me. You preach, and you don't think anything about it. Well, about 3 weeks later, I get a call from the president of said Bible college, and he says, Dave, we have a church, or I've got a guy here on staff who has a church that you might be interested in. They might be interested in you. And so I get in touch, and through that, I get in touch with Pastor Spurgeon here at Mount Ephraim, and he and I talk on the phone, and we couldn't meet. He was about to head to England for his 50th wedding anniversary. He and his wife were going over there to celebrate. And he said, I'll get back in touch with you in mid-June, really about this time last year. Well, mid-June, this was at the end of May, and mid-June rolls around, and I haven't heard anything. And I get up one morning, and I remember this. I told the sheriff about mid-morning. I said, I don't think it's going to happen. I said, we had a great conversation, but I think it's probably the case that, he's not feeling it, right? As whatever the case is, that's probably happening, and that's fine. We'll do whatever. I intended to sign my contract, and because we hadn't gotten contracts yet, mid-June, but I intended to sign my contract and go back to teaching and see, whatever else, wherever else the Lord leads, and whatever might happen. And then about 3 hours later, I get a call, and it's Pastor Spurgeon, and he wants to meet. And so we set up a time, and I come out here to the church, and man, he and I spent probably 4 hours talking before we went to lunch, and then another hour and a half or so, 2 hours talking. And it was one of those things where you, at least from my end, you felt like, man, this is going to happen. The Lord has opened this door, and this is amazing. I did not expect this kind of a moment for me, and just how much I appreciated the conversation with Pastor Spurgeon and where he was at and what he's been through in ministry and his leadership. and the opportunity. And I told him at one point later in the summer, I said, look, I would attend church here just to learn from you, whether I came on staff or not, just because of his experience and what the Lord's done in his life and where he's at. And he offered, we talked about potentially coming on full time last summer, and he was gracious, and congregation was gracious and understanding that I'd kind of made a commitment to go back to the school. No, as I mentioned a few moments ago, I had not signed a contract yet, but I had mentioned to some of the students, some of the juniors who were going to be seniors that next year, that I would be coming back, and I wanted to keep, I wanted to keep my word to them and come back for their, for that last year and see it through. And so they were gracious in allowing me to come on as a part-time associate pastor and kind of learn the ropes, at least a little bit. And it also gave the church and pastor an opportunity to see whether or not they would want to have me on full-time, and vice versa, whether or not it would be a good fit, whether or not it was a good fit for Cherith and I. And so as the summer went on and we got brought on, man, it's been such a blessing. I didn't know this a few years ago, though. Cherith mentioned that she'd like to play piano again, in churches, and be able to use her gift and her talent, because in a lot of the places we've been, she hasn't played, and that's because it's more. We've been in some of the more modern churches, and that's really not her preference and her style, and so we were kind of at an impasse. I wasn't necessarily crazy about going back to two churches that are sort of piano only. And she, at the same time, she couldn't play in a church that is kind of whole praise band, Christian concerts type stuff. And Ephraim has been a great mix of that, where she's also been able to get involved and play piano again, and be in the music ministry and use her gifts and her talents in a way that honors the Lord. And so that's been amazing. Benji has, as we've been here, he's loved his classes, he's loved his teachers, and they love him, and so it's been a good fit for him, and for me as well. Just in terms of, again, I get to preach. I've had several opportunities to preach on Sunday morning. I'm teaching an adult Sunday school class, and so it's been a blessing to be a part of that and see, where the Lord leads from here. Lead us here. This is not something, a year and a month ago, if you'd have told me this is going to be where you're at, I would not have expected that at all. It would have been quite shocking. But it's a blessing, and I'm grateful for what the Lord's done and for the opportunity to serve in this capacity. And it's been, in that regard, a year first. I've never really been an associate pastor before, at least not with these kinds of responsibilities and doing these things. I haven't done VBS in a long time, and if you saw my reel on Facebook or Instagram, doing that, working with the teenagers, kind of some throwback to my neighborhood Bible time days when I was 19. I'm getting hit in the face again with pie. That's the second time in like 8 months that's happened. But being part of that, going to the Southern Baptist Convention's national conference, and being able to vote in that as a messenger. I've never been to one, and so to see how it worked and what they did, I'm not really a church politics guy. I've had to do far more of that than I've wanted to over the years in terms of being a deacon or an elder at times. Not really, not really my taste. But it was interesting to see what they were doing and how they do it, and then the resources that the SBC brings to bear is remarkable, and the access that they have to be able to send missionaries out to do the work that they do. You're talking about an organization that is, in terms of their churches, the estimate is about 15 million Christians, and in particular, relatively conservative. Across there is a spectrum with this kind of stuff. Baptist, and the opportunity to have even a small voice in that, to cast even yes, it's just one vote, but to be in a church that sees the value in it and sees the value in fighting for conservative values and biblical fidelity, correct biblical interpretation, of even controversial passages. They're not really controversial. They're only controversial because the culture shifted over the last 20 years, and people think emotionally, and people think, felt needs. Well, I feel this way, or, what. But I look to all of that. And if you know kind of what I'm hinting at or inferring here, God never calls you to do anything contrary to his will. He doesn't gift you to do things contrary to his will. He doesn't call you to positions or offices that would be contrary to his word. Um, so there's these things aren't like actually biblically controversial. They're only controversial because somebody's got their feelings in it or their pride in it, and that's what is their authority, not the word of God, but how they feel or what they want, what they desire, and then they just slap God on that. In all my years being around church ministries and Christian school ministries, one of the things I've realized is that the will of God gets blamed for a lot of things that the will of God knows nothing about. And that is to say, I've rarely seen a ministry or an individual that, hey, this is his will and he's called me to that. When it all goes nuts later, all goes south later, I've never seen them step back and say, you know what, maybe we were wrong and that wasn't the will of God. Maybe we weren't quite as wise or discerning as we thought we were. So being in the SBC, having been in strongly independent circles for so many years, has been kind of eye-opening for me. You realize, not all of them are as conservative as I am, or where I'm at with things, but many of them are. There are godly churches and godly men who care about biblical faithfulness, and they're in the fight. And that's what has become so important to me. I've heard a lot of guys through the years, going back to my days, even in high school or college, you hear a lot of guys talking about, the fight and drawing a line and doing all this kind of stuff. Sure, I guess, wherever you're at in your areas and in those areas, but oftentimes the message was we retreat and we call it separation. Well, for a lot of the churches in the SBC now, there is no retreat. It is hold the line and let's fight. This is something that is worth fighting for. It's power in society and in politics, and 15 million believers. This is something worth fighting for in terms of its heart and soul and mind, if you will, as an organization. What it brings to bear in terms of missions and missions work. This is something to be in. And I know with coming out of this national convention, the controversy over the amendment and limiting or clarifying the idea that the pastorate is only for guys, again, not controversial, means that we're going to lose churches. If you've seen the numbers, or even what I posted, 25% of the churches voted against that idea for different reasons. It's not to say they all, that those churches all think that women can be pastors. It's just that some of those churches didn't think the amendment was necessary. For them, it was just another level of bureaucracy. Whatever the case, the SBC is going to lose churches. And to that end, the answer is not, yes, the SBC is smaller, whatever. They're going to lose churches, fine. But there are good conservative Baptist churches out there that should affiliate with the SBC, that should join in the fight, and should send their godly church members as messengers to have a vote, to have a say, to engage in the debate and to fight back, or in this case, to hold the line. At some point, quit holding the fort and throw the gates open and attack, and seize ground for the name of Christ and for biblical faithfulness and for love of the Word of God and its correct exposition in the lives of believers. But instead of just holding up and shutting the doors and again, holding the fort, maybe throw the doors open and send a contingent out to fight, and do something, relative to that. All that to say, I know you're like, Skyros, an update video. Why? Well, rabbit trails sometimes are a lot of fun. So being at Mount Ephraim now and being a part of the SBC, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful for the chance to serve in this capacity and do ministry here. And I won't say that, I've been in ministry in terms of Christian schools. That's a whole other rabbit trail that I'm going to go down for a minute. Church school, is ministry. Teaching in Christian education is ministry. I know there's pastors out there who disagree with that, and that's fine. Uh, you know, being snarky a little bit, you can be wrong, but it's ministry, and it's important ministry. And I've appreciated the opportunities to do it, the opportunities to be involved in it, and now just kind of shifting gears to other ministry in terms of not in a Christian classroom per se, but behind the pulpit in a church office. So it's a great opportunity, as I've said many times, and I'm very grateful for it. In terms of some family things, Cherith also is not going to teach next year. She is taking some time, and she wants to homeschool Benji, who's going into first grade, and she's going to do piano and some other things that she's been wanting to do. And so as the Lord opens those doors, we're grateful for it, the chance for her to do that. My oldest son, Micaiah, who turned 21 this last May, which is crazy because I might look it, but I don't feel old enough to be the dad of a 21-year-old. That is, one of the things when I was a younger man, or when I was a teenager and a kid and such, you'd hear the old people say that they feel younger than they look. Yes, I realize as you watch this, as I can see myself sort of in the video, that I look every bit of 46, hopefully no older than that. And if you think, well, he looks younger than that, you are one of my favorite people now. But I may look every bit of 46. I still feel, in a sense, 26. So it's a strange thing to have a son who's 21 and feel like, man, we're only 5 years apart. But he's, as of this last May, he's 21. He is working for a local trucking company, or a local branch, if you will, of a trucking company, and he's enjoying that, and thinks that he would like to be to go into truck driving full time as he gets the experience and as he gets old enough, as the positions open up. So he's enjoying that, and he got married this last November, which is another kind of crazy thing to me, that I am not old enough to have a son who's married, and I'm not old enough to have a daughter-in-law. But he married a great and godly young lady, and they live down in Punta Gorda. He actually moved out last summer, got his own place, getting ready, getting prepped for all that stuff. And honestly, he was a 20-year-old guy working full time, making his own money, and he was ready to move out. And look, we love him, but we were ready for him to move out also. It's never an easy thing. It's all kind of bittersweet, mixed blessing, all that sort of stuff. But it was time for him to go. He knew that, we knew that, and so he moved out and then got married in November, and that was that's a great thing, great ceremony, and happy for them and what they're doing and where they're at in life. It also is kind of daunting to me, though, that with him being married and such, now we're not yet. This is not any kind of an announcement thing, but man, the thought sometimes hits me. I could be a granddad soon, but I'm too young to be Grandpa Calger, or whatever name you want to ascribe to that. My wife is too young to be Grandma Calger, or whatever names you want to ascribe to that. So yeah, that's daunting. And I know people who are, and they're like, oh, it's a blessing. It's amazing. It's the most amazing thing in the world. Sure. Yeah. I believe that. My grandparents were great. Loved them. And, but no, not quite ready, I think, to turn the corner on that and accept that reality. But that's where he's at. That's where Micaiah's at in life, where he's married, and doing well, and enjoying things, and so it's been great. The other things, I just mentioned grandparents. We did, late February, early March, my grandma Calger died. She was 90, and so that was a tough thing. I know it's kind of a heavy thing to drop in a YouTube video. It's a tough thing. It's never easy to say goodbye, and it's never easy to shut the door in some ways on that stuff. Yes, there's the hope of heaven. My grandma was a believer. She knew Christ. I'm happy for her that she is fully healed in the presence of Christ, that she is with her Savior, and that she is with Grandpa Calger, who died about 20 years ago. That they are reunited, and that she's reunited with other, family and friends in heaven. And what is the hope that we as Christians have in terms of eternity, the hope that we have in terms of heaven? It's still hard for all of us who, as if you, for many of you, if you've lost somebody that you love, family or friend, you know that it's still a difficult thing to say goodbye, to feel like that chapter is done. And so going through that this last spring, and knowing there's some changes in terms of leaving education, leaving the classroom, leaving students, all that kind of stuff. It was kind of, for me at least, a heavier, if you will, heavier spring than, as a teacher, I'm used to thinking in semesters, a heavier semester than any I've had in quite a while. And so it was an interesting thing to kind of walk through that. One of the bright spots was going out to Arizona on the senior trip. Again, you've seen pictures. I just posted something recently because I was reading a book. I've got it here actually on my desk. I've got a stack of other books that I'm currently trying to read, called A Canyon Voyage. Very much recommend it. It's exploration. It is from the John Wesley Powell expedition. I think it's the second expedition. One of the guys who was kept track of it, kept a journal, and then published the account. So I was reading through that, and there was a phrase in it that reminded me of the senior trip to Arizona, and sort of just had posted because they're going down the Colorado River in the book. And we had the opportunity to kayak for a section of the Colorado River, and that was an amazing thing. And there was at one point where all of the other chaperones, the two other chaperones, and all my students were ahead of me on the river, and they had all rounded a bend, and it was just me setting the water. Nobody behind me, nobody in front of me. Canyon walls on the side. Yes, you are in the Grand Canyon. You're not in Grand Canyon National Park, but you are in the Grand Canyon. Canyon walls, and I just stopped and sat in the water. It's an amazing thing in terms of how loud absolute silence can be. Not hearing anything for a moment. No cars, no planes, no stinking phones going off, no talking, no nothing, and just sitting there. And it was an amazing moment. I'm grateful that the Lord allowed me to have that opportunity, and I'm grateful that my students had the opportunity to go out and see some of the natural wonder of northern Arizona and what's there. So for me, that was a great time in terms of still dealing kind of, at least internally, with the loss of my grandmother, knowing that I'm switching gears from the classroom and saying goodbye to a lot of those relationships with students and others, and then and moving into something different that you're not quite as used to or confident in. And so having some of those quiet moments at the, whether with kayaking or even when we were at the Grand Canyon, to just think for a moment and just be for a moment was a great thing. So I'm grateful for that. I love, if you know me at all over the last couple of years, 3 years since we've been out there and taken a couple trips now, I love the Grand Canyon. I'd seen it as a kid, but man, you just don't know until 3 years ago we went out there on a senior trip as well, and it was an amazing thing. I've never forgotten how that initial feeling, my initial feelings on seeing it again, and it is my favorite place in the world. So being out there again this last spring and having the chance to show the seniors, many of whom had never seen it, I was grateful. They all seemed to appreciate it. They may have lied to the old man teacher, which is, I suppose, fine. Made me feel, at least in the moment, made me feel good. But to show them the canyon and some of the areas around it was a blessing. And I'm grateful that the Lord allowed us to have that opportunity and to have that time. And I look forward, Lord willing, to the opportunity to go out there again and to see it and experience it, take my family out and have them see it. I look forward to that day. the Lord willing, it will come, and we'll see it. But having that in the middle of spring, in the midst of some of the other changes, was great. Appreciated. And then, again, saying goodbye in May to the seniors that were graduating that I taught for several years, to the juniors even that I taught when they were in 8th grade, and then had several of them from 8th grade, their freshman year, and some of the electives on up through their junior year, and saying goodbye to them. It was a little bit more emotional for me than I thought it would be. I told some of the seniors, a handful of them, halfway through the year, the question came up one day about whether or not I would speak at their graduation, and I told them I would probably be too emotional in that moment to do so. And they had it wasn't me, but they did have a great speaker, and I think I would have been too emotional. And even just saying goodbye in class, it kind of hit me harder than I thought. And again, I think it's just 17 years, and it was kind of all the students plus some of the other changes and all the things that had gone on in life, and you felt it. At least I felt it. And that's the nature of things. Sometimes, life changes, right? The Lord calls us to new things, and He calls the people in our lives to new things. And sometimes that stuff is tough to process in the moment, if you will. But I'm grateful for all that the Lord's done in our lives, in my life in particular, over the last 2 or 3 years. To all of you watching, I would say I hope that you also know Christ, and that over these last several years, whatever the case, and where you're at in life, that you're able to give thanks for what the Lord has done, and that you are faithfully pursuing His will for your life, that you also are seeking to be faithful to Scripture and to what the Lord wants to do. And if you're struggling with any of that kind of stuff, listen, find people that you can talk to, men or women that you trust their biblical wisdom, and have them help you. And then obviously go before the Lord in prayer, search His Word for what He has for you there. The Scripture is rich. And if you don't know that, if you get into it, you will discover that there's profound wisdom there to help guide you and direct you in all that you're going to do in this life. Those 66 books have the answer. May not specifically, but in principle, in terms of the principles they lay out, the truths they lay out, it has the answers you're looking for, but you have to crack it open and read it. You have to study it. You have to read it with a mind, to apply it, to live it out. And you have to seek the wisdom of the Holy Spirit to help you to understand and apply it. And so wherever you're at in life, I do hope you're pursuing the will of God, that you're pursuing His glory, that you're doing those things that would honor Him and would propagate the gospel wherever it is that He has you. I know this has been long. As I look down at the timer thing, I'm right at 33 minutes. If you've stuck with me, I know I see the algorithm stuff or whatever, the video things, and it's, people kind of skip through it or bounce through it. Yeah, it's fine. But if you stuck with me, I appreciate it. If you know me, I'm not technologically savvy. And so I think comments will be on this. If you have any questions or cares or concerns, you can question on there. You can always find me on social media. I am on Facebook and Instagram. I wouldn't, while I was teaching, I wouldn't let students follow or friend or anything like that. But since I'm out now, you're welcome to, if you see this, you're welcome to find me on Facebook, you can find me on Instagram, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, or interact there as you will. All right, appreciate your time, appreciate your attention. The Lord bless you.